They say that during the Christmas holiday season, a lot of people get depressed, particularly people who are alone during those long gray days. Many years ago, I talked to a radio psychiatrist, Dr. Joe Novello. If his last name sounds a little familiar, his brother Don played Father Guido Sarducci in a lot of comedy skits. I mentioned to Dr. Novello that it had been only recently that I realized that a psychiatrist has to be a doctor first.
That's right. A psychiatrist graduate from medical school, and then rather than going off and specializing in pediatrics or obstetrics or surgery, one specializes in psychiatry, which is an additional 3 or 4 years.
A lot of people have that stereotypical image of the psychiatrist, which has been, I guess, part of every skit from vaudeville to modern day, where there's a fellow with a German accent running around the room while someone else is lying on a couch spilling their guts to them. How new is psychiatry as far as a recognized part of medicine? Is it just something of this century?
Psychiatry can be thought of as a 20th century profession. In fact, in many ways, it's still in its infancy. The stereotypic psychiatrist is still, unfortunately, the Viennese psychoanalyst a la Sigmund Freud, someone who speaks with a Viennese accent, smokes a pipe, and says, "What seems to be the problem?" But psychiatry has gone a long way since those days, and the new and exciting discoveries in psychiatry now are coming in areas of biochemistry research, neurophysiology, new medications, genetic research. Psychiatry is very much in the mainstream of American medicine.
You mentioned the chemical aspects of psychiatry. Aren't we just now scratching the surface, realizing that many emotional problems do have their bases in chemical or physical things? And to read into that, I guess what I'm saying is there must have been a great wealth of people who were mentally or having psychological problems that couldn't be diagnosed, that there was no understanding of the fact that something else was motivating them to do that it wasn't purely psychological.
Oh, there's no question about that. Just as diagnosis and treatment in medicine and surgery has advanced incredibly over the last several decades, the same is true in psychiatry. And now we are able to treat things with more precision than we were 10, 20, and 30 years ago, and that will continue to happen over the coming decades, I'm sure.
What would you say is the biggest advance during the time that you've been practicing psychiatry? Is there one particular area that's either opened up and blossomed or really maybe wasn't there when you started? How many years have you been doing this?
Well, I've been practicing psychiatry since 1974. I would say the major field of advance over the past decade has probably been in the treatment of depression. New classes of medications have come online. We are now able to identify manic depressive illness clearly as transmitted genetically, something we long suspected, but only recently have we been able to pinpoint that. And I think new advances will come in a similar way in the diagnosis and treatment of schizophrenia and its subtypes, but that is still off in the future.
Let's back up a little bit. You do a daily radio program in the Washington, D.C. area. For those who have been listening to you talk here, I'm sure one of the things that has hit their mind is that you have a very professional manner of speaking. I know when I first heard you on the radio, my first thought was, and I hope you don't take too much offense by this, that it was kind of an act that an announcer was doing. You have a wonderful, resonant kind of voice. Have you been told that before, that you really on the air sound more, not, if you strip away the content of what you're saying, your voice sounds more like an announcer than what a person would expect from a doctor?
Well, you wouldn't be surprised if you knew that I started out as an announcer, not as a doctor.
Well, I'm not surprised.
My major in college was journalism, and I worked in radio and television. And I, at that time, contemplated a career in radio and television, and somewhere along the way went wrong and went off to medical school. I never expected to come back and continue a career in medical journalism, but that's the way it's turned out. So I've been able to combine the two interests.
Well, now, you have then a pretty good understanding of people who sweat over career changes then. In modern times, I see that as a really difficult thing. My father worked 33 years at one job. He was a salesman, but he was a very quiet man, and my dad, I don't think he ever asked for a raise in the 33 years. But I know that there had to be times he said to himself, I should be doing something other than selling toilets. What got into you? I mean, obviously you've succeeded, but that's kind of a radical departure from punching a typewriter to doing that long routine of going through medical school. That in itself is a scary thing to look at, I would think.
Well, there was a lot of medical influence in my family. My father is a physician. I had 3 uncles that were physicians, and the interest had been there for a long time. And I think I was probably just delaying the inevitable when I started out in journalism.
So you didn't just see a matchbook cover and decide, I'm going to become an instant doctor or something?
It was nothing like that. But at the time, it was fairly unusual for someone to apply to medical school without being a major in biochemistry or biology or one of the hard sciences. And so I had a bit of a sell to convince the admissions people that they ought to take a chance on a guy like me. But I'm pleased that I did that. I wouldn't do it any other way. I'm pleased to be a psychiatrist because, again, psychiatry really stands, I think, at the hub of medicine and its many interfaces, and the premium in psychiatry is on being able to communicate with people, something that I had previously trained for. And now I've been able to combine an interest in journalism with an interest, of course, in medicine and psychiatry.
We've heard criticisms lately of physicians who do not talk to their patients. I remember seeing a program on public broadcasting where a lot of senior citizens were saying that they really just ached to sit down and talk to the doctor. Herein, I would think, would lie a problem in that it's not easy for a lot of people to open up. If you're going in, let's say, with a straight medical problem, or perceived as being only a medical, not a psychological problem, the doctor has other people waiting. And if there are certain nuances to what's wrong with you, I can see that not being fully explored during that short office visit. Does not the psychiatrist have an advantage in that the system with which you work is conversation? That by its very nature you are having to sit down, and as long as it takes, you're going to get to the bottom of what's going on. Where a physician doesn't necessarily have that luxury.
No, he doesn't. As a matter of fact, I was once a family physician, and I know what it's like to have 2 patients scheduled every 15 minutes for several hours at a crack. You don't have a lot of time to talk to people. However, you can pick up many cues, and it's possible to schedule people to come back for talking sessions, something that I did when I was a family doctor, something that many doctors still do not do. Yet it's a two-way street. Just as a doctor has an obligation to listen and to talk to his patients, patients too have to be partners in their own health care, and they have to make sure that their doctor takes the time to answer the questions that they should be asking. And if that partnership is affected, then we have good medicine practiced. There have been some changes, and certain trends have been confirmed. Divorce is certainly with us. The divorce rate now 50% or thereabouts, and it means that a majority of youngsters, at least in some surveys, will experience living with just one parent sometime before their 18th birthday. Latchkey children is a phenomenon, I think, increasingly of the last decade, and because of increasing numbers of mothers in the workforce, the 2 career families, we have more latchkey children, and that's a phenomenon. The single-parent family, of course, is in large measure a spin-off of the high divorce rate. And then you have the step-family phenomenon. It is a type of family. We used to speak perhaps 15, 20 years ago of the step-family as an aberration. It's no longer an aberration. It is one form that the American family has taken.
And that creates a difficult situation where a child suddenly has to decide allegiances in many cases. And I can see in the holiday season that shared time situation quite often can get really complicated, because there are some premium events during the holiday season and some secondary ones. And who decides which child gets to enjoy which with which family?
Well, that's one of the issues, and children become a pawn between mom and dad who want the youngsters for the holidays. There are other phenomena too. There's the well-known phenomenon of the absent, non-custodial father who doesn't come around all year long, maybe doesn't even support the youngsters, and then loads them down with gifts over the holidays in an effort to win their allegiance. Mom maybe can't afford to buy that kind of gift. She's angry at the father for doing this, but she doesn't want to undercut him with the youngsters, so she doesn't say anything, and again, the kids are caught in the middle. Another phenomenon is the youngster who has perhaps been spending the holidays with the non-custodial parent, but who is now 12 or 13 years old, wants to spend her time with her friends and not go off to California to see dad. How does she communicate that to him? Does she communicate it? Is mom supposed to communicate it? How does he feel about it? What should be done in a case like that? These are issues that come up time and time again during the holidays.
I would think, being a child, that the fear of the future would be made worse by seeing parents who all of a sudden appear to be very vulnerable. That when you have parents arguing, or you have parents split up geographically, or the child seeing the parent themselves being at wit's end, it's difficult then for that parent to be the traditional pillar of strength to the child. Mm-hmm. It must be scary to be a child and say, who do I have to lean on now?
Well, that's very true. The single parent that you're referring to is asked to do a lot. Mom is asked to be superwoman. Dad is asked to be superman. And it's superhuman and impossible to ask of parents to be all things to kids all the time. That's why the single parent family, especially during the holidays, really requires teamwork. Everyone has to be working together. I sometimes say that everyone is like a spoke on the wheel. Every spoke has to do its job if the wheel is to turn, and that's especially true during the holidays.
My mother consistently said to me, and she still does, if there's anything you want to talk about, no matter what time of the day or night it is, let's talk about it. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't keep a lot of secrets from my mother. Is it uncommon that there just is no communication between parent and child? How much more do parents need to let the child know that they can talk, and the parent will provide time for the child to talk, much as we said the doctor should?
One of the most important skills for a parent to learn, and I stress learn, it's not something that comes naturally, is how to listen so kids will talk. The key to good communication with children is being able to listen, not being able to talk. Another skill necessary, though, is how to talk so kids will listen, but I would put the emphasis on listening. That's how you will find out what's really in the hearts and minds of your children. You will listen your way into a good relationship with your son or daughter much more quickly than you'll ever talk your way into.
Let's talk a little bit more about the holiday season if we can. I mentioned to you before the interview something that you said was maybe overrated, and that's the feeling of being alone at the holiday season, the syndrome, if you will, of depression, particularly for those people who are alone. I remember talking to cartoonist Charles Schulz, who does the Peanuts characters, who said that the reason he wanted to do a Christmas special for Charlie Brown for us was that he felt a great deal of depression at Christmas time. You said that was somewhat overstated. Is there not, though, something to be said for seeing other people happy and you yourself being alone during this season of the year?
I think this whole matter of so-called Christmas depression needs some clarification. It's become an evergreen, so to speak, in the communications business to prance out stories on Christmas depression during the holidays. I think there is a form of holiday depression. However, I would spell that depression with a lowercase d, not a capital D. Depression, as we know it in the clinical practice of psychiatry, is actually less prevalent during the month of December than at other months. The month of December ranks among the lowest in suicides, the lowest in admissions to psychiatric hospitals. Many depressed patients feel well enough, if they're being treated on an outpatient basis, to take a vacation from their therapist during the holidays. So clinical depression, if anything, is less prevalent during the holidays. But there is a type of depression that I'm distinguishing by spelling with a lowercase d that is the kind of reactive, everyday blues and blahs that we might all go through. And why is that more prevalent during the holidays? Well, I think because if you tend to be lonely, but you're handling it fairly well during the rest of the year, that loneliness becomes magnified during the holidays because of all the hustle and bustle and good cheer all around you. You're not supposed to feel depressed during the holidays. You're supposed to be out there doing your shopping, partying, and all the rest. And that's the kind of depression that we're talking about. So if you distinguish that from clinical depression, I would say yes, we are talking about a phenomenon of sorts that might be called the Christmas blues. Yes, I think sometimes families need to hire an expediter or a scheduler during the holidays. Most of that pressure seems to fall on mothers, and the so-called working mother, that is the mother who works outside the home, is especially vulnerable. She's got her job to keep up. She's got the kids now home from school. She's worried about them. She has holiday preparations, maybe visitors. She's got the shopping list. Most often, unfortunately, she doesn't get as much help from her spouse as she should get. Dad has his pressures, too, of providing, at least in most traditional families. And when Christmas wish lists, those lists to Santa Claus, look more like demands from children than wishes, Dad can feel a lot of pressure. I'm not in favor of overloading youngsters with gifts during the holidays. We've all had the experience of parents buying expensive gifts for kids, sitting back and watching them unwrap their gifts, and then spend the rest of the day playing with the cardboard boxes that those expensive gifts came from, and they're bored already with that gift that does one thing after you wind it up or start the batteries. So I would emphasize this. I would say a good formula for youngsters and parents during the holidays is plan to give something of yourself, but only hope to get.
Doctor, let's talk about your childhood. I see on the wall you have, if I can translate Latin, a graduate degree from Michigan.
Yes.
Am I reading that as
That's right. That's my Doctor of Medicine degree.
I not only don't have my glasses, but it isn't in English. Did you grow up there? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in the Cleveland, Ohio area.
Okay.
And my family still lives in the Cleveland area.
Tell us a little bit, if you would, about your memories of Christmas time, about your family and growing up in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. Well, Christmas was and is always special to us. The preparations included buying gifts for family members, and the event was and is largely celebrated on Christmas Eve, when the family gets together for a dinner, and then we share our gifts and go to midnight Mass. Christmas Day, then, is spent either by having friends and family come to the house for a visit, or we will go to their homes for visiting and have a dinner of leftover turkey or whatever, and pasta, by the way, on Christmas Day night.
A man with a smooth voice, still practicing family medicine and psychiatry after all these years. Dr. Joe Novello. I'm Dennis Daly.